Everyone thought it was just another ordinary day. The sun was setting over the city streets, casting long shadows, but nothing could have prepared anyone for what was about to happen. People walking by glanced at the commotion, whispering under their breath, trying to figure out what was going on. And in the middle of it all stood Ozzy Osbourne, calm, composed, and completely unbothered. Across from him, muscles bulging, veins popping, a bodybuilder sneered like he owned the world. He had that look. The one that screams, "I can crush anyone who dares to stand in my way." And today, his target was Ozzy Osbourne. Not for fame, not for money, just for ego. The bodybuilder thought he could scare the rock legend, flex his massive arms, and make everyone around tremble. He took a step closer, chest puffed out, fists clenched. His shadow loomed over Ozzy, and a hush fell over the small crowd that had started gathering. People were holding their phones, recording, expecting a fight, a spectacle, maybe even expecting Ozzy to step back, intimidated. But Ozzy did nothing. Not a flinch, not a step back. He just stood there, rocking his iconic sunglasses, a faint smirk on his lips. The tension was almost unbearable. Every eye in the street was glued to the scene. You could feel the fear, the adrenaline, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Who would blink first? The bodybuilder laughed, a low, menacing chuckle, thinking he had already won. He waved his massive arms, his biceps flexing like steel cables, and said something meant to provoke, a taunt designed to humiliate. But the thing about Ozzy, legends like him don't react the way normal people do. They don't get scared, they don't get flustered, and they sure as hell don't back down. The world had always underestimated him, thinking fame makes someone soft, fragile, or easy to intimidate. But right here, right now, the bodybuilder was about to learn a very hard truth. Because Ozzy wasn't just a rock star. He was a force, a presence. A man who had faced far bigger threats than someone showing off their muscles on a street corner. And the second that smirk appeared on Ozzy's face, that second the bodybuilder realized he had chosen the wrong guy. No one could have predicted what happened next, and that's why everyone stopped in their tracks. Because the moment was about to explode, and the world was about to see why legends are never to be underestimated. Before anyone could even react to the tense standoff on the street, it was important to understand exactly who was standing there. This wasn't just any man the bodybuilder thought he could intimidate. This was Ozzy Osbourne, a name that alone carried decades of history, defiance, and sheer dominance. Rock music wasn't just his career, it was his battlefield. And for decades, he had proven time and time again that no one, absolutely no one, could push him around. Ozzy didn't gain respect by being quiet or polite. He earned it by surviving everything the world threw at him. Scandals, chaos, battles with people who thought they were bigger, stronger, tougher. He faced them all. And every time he came out standing taller, colder, sharper. That calm, almost lazy smirk he now wore on his face wasn't arrogance. It was the quiet confidence of a man who had lived through storms most people couldn't imagine and come out unbroken. Across from him, the bodybuilder was all brawn and bravado, a walking mountain of muscle who thrived on intimidation. He wasn't used to being challenged. People usually stepped aside, flinched, or at least lowered their eyes when he walked into a room. That made him feel powerful. That made him dangerous, at least in his own mind. He had worked for years to sculpt his body to become a human weapon that people feared just by standing near him. And now, here was Ozzy Osbourne standing like a calm statue, completely unfazed by the threat. The bodybuilder had watched Ozzy perform on stage, seen his fame, and assumed he could use that moment to teach him a lesson. Maybe he wanted to prove himself. Maybe he just wanted to feel dominance for once. Whatever the reason, he had no idea that he was walking into the wrong fight. Because Ozzy's battles weren't about who had the bigger muscles or the louder voice. His battles were psychological, precise, and merciless. One wrong move, one slip in ego, and you didn't just lose. You got exposed. Ozzy, on the other hand, had already faced countless challenges that would have shattered a lesser man. Physical threats, chaotic crowds, and relentless critics were nothing compared to the steel-hard patience he had developed over years. That patience wasn't weakness, it was a weapon. And as the bodybuilder stepped closer, each step echoing his confidence, Ozzy didn't move a muscle. He didn't shout, he didn't need to. Every inch of his posture screamed, Bring it if you dare, but you'll regret it. What most people didn't realize was that Ozzy had a mind built for situations exactly like this. While the bodybuilder flexed and postured, the legend calculated. He observed. He anticipated. Every sneer, every jab, every attempted intimidation was recorded mentally, filed away and marked for a counter that the bodybuilder couldn't even see coming. And that was the key. Ozzy never fought with brute force. He fought with presence, strategy, and timing. Even the onlookers could feel it, the tension, the silent warning in Ozzy's gaze. It wasn't just that he was famous. It wasn't just that he had survived everything life threw at him. It was that he had survived himself. Every reckless choice, every challenge, every battle had sharpened him into someone untouchable. And now, this bodybuilder, all muscle and arrogance, was about to face the consequence of misjudging the wrong man. By the time the first words were exchanged, the stage was set. Two very different kinds of power were facing each other: raw, visible, physical strength versus decades of calculated, unshakable dominance. And everyone who watched knew one thing: they weren't seeing a typical confrontation. This was a showdown of presence, of mindset, and of respect. The moment was loaded, and the bodybuilder still didn't realize it. But he was already trapped. Not physically, but mentally. He had walked into Ozzy's world thinking intimidation worked. He had walked into Ozzy's world thinking muscles were enough. And for the next few seconds, everything was about to prove him wrong in a way no one would forget. The bodybuilder wasn't subtle, not even a little. Every inch of him screamed intimidation. He stepped closer, his heavy boots thudding against the pavement. Each step like a challenge. His chest rose and fell, veins pulsing in his bulging arms as he flexed almost theatrically. He smirked, thinking he had the upper hand before a single word was exchanged. "This your big rock star face?" he sneered. "Thought you were famous, huh? Let's see if you can handle someone real in front of all these people." The small crowd surrounding them murmured, some stepping back, others inching closer to catch the spectacle. They could feel it in the air. Tension so thick it could choke. And in that moment, for the first time, the bodybuilder believed he was in control. He had muscles, size, and a loud, dominating presence. What did this old rocker have? A smirk? A reputation? It wouldn't matter. He was about to prove it. But then something happened that no one, including the bodybuilder, expected. Ozzy Osbourne, legendary rock icon, barely shifted. His posture didn't tighten, his eyes didn't widen, and his lips curled into a small, almost lazy smile. He didn't say a word. He didn't even flinch. He just stood there, watching, listening, observing. Every movement of the bodybuilder was catalogued, every sneer filed away, every attempt at intimidation noted. And that's when the first crack in the bodybuilder's confidence appeared. Subtle, almost invisible, but real. Ozzy's calmness wasn't weakness. It was a weapon. It told him without words that he was in over his head, that no amount of muscle or bluster could shake this man. "You think size matters?" Ozzy finally said, his voice low, deliberate, and cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "You think I care what you look like?" "That's funny." The bodybuilder paused, caught off guard by the sheer calmness and confidence in Ozzy's tone. He expected fear, hesitation, maybe even respect. But not this. Not a man who stood still, collected, and dared to mock him with only words. His smirk faltered, replaced by a twitch of irritation. He took another step closer, trying to regain control. "You don't know who you're messing with. I could crush you in a second." Ozzy tilted his head slightly, studying him. "You could try," he said simply, letting a faint grin show. "But I've survived people bigger than you, people meaner than you, and trust me, you're not even in the same league." The bodybuilder's confidence wavered. He had expected intimidation to work instantly, that he could dominate by sheer presence. But Ozzy had flipped the script without even touching him. The crowd noticed, and a ripple of murmurs spread. Whispers turned into stifled laughter. The power dynamic had shifted, and the bodybuilder felt it, but he didn't want to admit it. Frustration flashed in his eyes. He flexed harder, thrust his chest forward, trying to make a show of strength, hoping Ozzy would react. But Ozzy remained unshaken. Every flex, every threatening movement, Ozzy watched and waited. It was as if time slowed down, and the rules of intimidation were rewritten in that street corner moment. Finally, the bodybuilder let out a loud snort, trying to assert dominance with words again. "You think you're scary? You think you can handle me?" Ozzy leaned slightly closer, his eyes cold, sharp, and unyielding. "You're scary to yourself," he said, calm and precise. "And you're about to find out that muscles don't make a man. Dangerous." That was it. That simple sentence, that small tilt of a head, did what hours of intimidation couldn't. The bodybuilder hesitated, his mind racing, realizing the truth. This wasn't a fight of size. This was a fight of presence, experience, and control. And for the first time in his life, he felt powerless. The crowd sensed the shift. The bodybuilder's confidence, once unshakable, wavered like a flickering flame. He had thought this would be easy. He had thought he could dominate. But now, everything was slipping away, and the realization hit hard. He had chosen the wrong man. Ozzy didn't need to lift a finger. He didn't need to throw a punch. He didn't even need to yell. His presence, his calculated calm, and his reputation alone were enough to turn the tide. And in that moment, the bodybuilder knew that the confrontation he had imagined had already been lost. The bodybuilder had one thought repeating in his mind. "I've got this." He flexed again, tried to stare down Ozzy to project dominance. But with every passing second, that certainty began to crack. There was something about the way Ozzy moved, the calm in his eyes, that unsettled him. Not fear. He didn't think he was scared. But confusion. He had expected a reaction, a hint of weakness, anything that would make him feel in control. And yet, Ozzy gave nothing. Then it happened. Ozzy shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly, but the bodybuilder noticed it. A subtle movement of the head, a tilt that signaled awareness. And then came the words delivered cold, deliberate, and sharp. "You think this is a battle of strength? It's not. It's a battle of presence. And you just stepped into my arena." The crowd murmured. Phones were raised. Everyone felt the energy change in the air. Suddenly, the bodybuilder's smirk faltered. Something was happening. Something he hadn't anticipated. He had assumed this would be an easy show of power, a moment to humiliate an aging rock star in front of the crowd. Instead, he realized the rules had shifted, without him even noticing. Ozzy's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "I've stared down bigger threats, meaner people, and far crazier situations than you. And yet, here you are, thinking flexing and yelling will make me flinch." The bodybuilder's confidence wavered for the first time. He hesitated, unsure of how to act. Sweat began to bead on his forehead. Not from fear, but from the realization that his plan was failing. And failure was not something he had prepared for. Then came the subtle east twist, the move that changed everything. Ozzy took a single step forward. Just one. Not aggressive, not threatening in the conventional sense. But in that step, there was weight, authority, presence. And that step alone made the bodybuilder's entire stance falter. It was a psychological punch, a silent warning that all his muscle and intimidation could not compare to Ozzy's control. The crowd leaned in, sensing the change. Murmurs grew louder. Some of them whispered, "Whoa, did he just?" The bodybuilder tried to recover, puffing his chest and lifting his arms again. But it was too late. Ozzy had already taken the upper hand without throwing a single punch, without raising his voice beyond calm, measured words. And then came the kicker, the final twist. Ozzy leaned in slightly, his eyes locking with the bodybuilder's. Every person watching felt the intensity radiating from that stare. And he said, just low enough for the challenger to hear, "You picked the wrong fight. Not because I'm bigger, but because I've been fighting battles you can't even imagine, and I always win. Always." The words hit harder than any flexed bicep. The bodybuilder's arrogance crumbled in an instant. His movements became sloppy, his smirk gone, replaced by confusion and an unspoken panic. He realized that intimidation wasn't enough, size wasn't enough, and muscle alone would never carry him in this confrontation. He had underestimated Ozzy Osbourne, and that mistake was about to cost him. The twist wasn't just that Ozzy didn't back down. The twist was that he had turned the confrontation completely on its head. The bodybuilder, who thought he controlled the situation, was now reacting to Ozzy, unsure, exposed, and vulnerable. And in that moment, Everyone watching knew the fight had flipped. Power no longer resided in brute strength, but in presence, experience, and the calculated coldness of a true legend. By the time the bodybuilder attempted another move, another attempt at intimidation, the crowd could already see it. The tide had shifted. He wasn't in control. Ozzy was, and the bodybuilder's mistake, thinking muscles and ego were enough, was about to lead to a downfall he hadn't even imagined. The street fell silent, tension hanging thick. Phones were recording. Bystanders held their breath. Every eye was on them, and in that moment the twist was complete. Ozzy Osbourne had taken the fight without throwing a punch, and the bodybuilder was left powerless to stop it. The air crackled with tension. Every person watching knew something monumental was about to happen. The bodybuilder, muscles still tensed, chest puffed, tried to regain control. He threw a glare that was supposed to intimidate, but it fell flat. Every inch of his body screamed aggression, yet his confidence was slipping. He had walked in thinking he could dominate, humiliate, and scare. And now, he realized, he had underestimated Ozzy Osbourne in every possible way. Ozzy didn't move aggressively. He didn't need to. One step forward, one slow tilt of the head, and the bodybuilder's arrogance began to unravel. The crowd sensed it. Phones were pointed, recording every heartbeat of the confrontation. The street had become a stage, and the tension was so palpable that even the bystanders felt the power shift. "Thought you could scare me?" Ozzy said, his voice calm but slicing through the street like a razor. Every word carried authority, history, and menace. "Muscles don't impress me. Size doesn't intimidate me. And ego. Ego is the easiest thing to break." The bodybuilder's jaw tightened. He flexed again, trying to show strength, but it was empty. Ozzy's presence, his unshakable confidence, made every flex look pathetic in comparison. The crowd began murmuring, some gasping, some whispering, others laughing quietly. The power dynamic was clear. The bodybuilder's confidence, which had seemed unshakable moments ago, was crumbling with every calm word, every subtle movement from Ozzy. Then came the final blow, the moment that would define the confrontation. Ozzy leaned in slightly, just enough to close the psychological distance, his gaze sharp and unyielding. "You wanted a fight," he said. "You thought you could bully me. But let me tell you something. You picked the wrong man, at the wrong time, in the wrong way." The bodybuilder froze. That single statement, delivered with deadly calm, stripped away every ounce of arrogance. Sweat beaded on his forehead, not from exertion but from the dawning realization that he was completely outmatched. Muscles and intimidation couldn't touch the precision, experience, and presence Ozzy commanded. Ozzy raised one finger slowly, as if pointing out the obvious. "This isn't about size. It's about presence. It's about control. And you have neither." The bodybuilder's shoulders slumped slightly. His flexed arms dropped, his confidence shattered in seconds. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, not for the bodybuilder, but in stunned awe at Ozzy's dominance. People whispered, "He didn't even touch him, and he already won." Then came the final move, subtle but devastating. Ozzy leaned back just slightly, a smirk appearing on his face, a smirk that said everything. The bodybuilder tried one last intimidation tactic, one last aggressive gesture, but it was too late. The shift had been complete. The bodybuilder was now reacting to Ozzy, completely out of control, exposed and humiliated. By the time he finally backed away, the damage was done. The crowd sensed it. Phones were still recording. The street was alive with the energy of what had just happened. Ozzy had turned an attempted intimidation into a demonstration of dominance so clean, so complete, that it didn't even need physical force. The bodybuilder's ego lay in ruins, shattered by a man who had survived decades of battles far greater than a flexing stranger. Ozzy straightened, adjusting his sunglasses, and walked away slowly, deliberately, like a man who had just delivered a masterclass in presence, power, and psychological dominance. The bodybuilder remained frozen, caught in the aftermath of underestimating a legend. Every bystander watching understood one thing: you never ever pick the wrong man to intimidate. In that moment, the story had reached its peak. Muscles versus mastery, ego versus experience, Brute strength versus presence. And the winner was clear. Ozzy Osbourne had not only survived the challenge, but had completely destroyed the bodybuilder's attempts at dominance without lifting a hand. The street, now buzzing, had witnessed a lesson few would forget. The climax wasn't just about winning a confrontation. It was about showing that real power isn't always loud, visible, or aggressive. It's calculated, unshakable, and commanded by presence. And for the bodybuilder, this truth was brutal. Humiliation had never been so swift, so total, and so irreversible. The confrontation was over, or at least it should have been. But the aftershocks of what just happened were still reverberating through the street. Every bystander, every phone camera, every whispered conversation carried the story of how the bodybuilder, once brimming with confidence, had been completely dismantled without a single punch being thrown. The bodybuilder stood frozen, trying to salvage some shred of dignity, but it was gone. Gone in an instant, erased by the quiet authority and lethal presence of Ozzy Osbourne. Every muscle that had been flexed to intimidate now looked like overcompensation. Every sneer now looked absurd. The reality hit him like a hammer. He had challenged a legend and lost, not through brute force but through sheer dominance, experience, and unshakable presence. People in the crowd whispered among themselves. "Did you see that?" one asked. "He didn't even touch him. And the guy's ego is destroyed." Phones were still rolling, capturing the slow, almost stunned retreat of the bodybuilder. It was a moment destined to go viral, not because of violence, but because of mastery, because of the sheer lesson in power that had just been delivered. Ozzy adjusted his sunglasses, looked around at the crowd, and gave a small, knowing nod. No words were needed. The point had been made. Presence, experience, and calm precision had triumphed over arrogance, size, and aggression. In seconds, what had started as an attempted intimidation had become a lesson in humility, and the bodybuilder was the unwitting teacher's example. The bodybuilder tried to mutter something, a last attempt to reclaim control, but it came out hollow. There was no comeback. The power dynamic had shifted irreversibly, and as he walked away, shoulders slumped and chest no longer puffed, the street echoed with a new truth. You don't challenge someone like Ozzy Osbourne unless you're ready to lose. Not with punches, but with presence alone. Meanwhile, the crowd's energy transformed. What had started as curiosity turned into admiration. Phones continued recording, capturing not just the bodybuilder's humiliation, but the complete mastery Ozzy displayed. The lesson was clear, simple, and unforgettable. True power isn't shown in how hard you can hit. It's shown in how completely you can control a situation without losing your composure. Even the bodybuilder knew it now. He had walked into a fight thinking size and intimidation were enough, and now, stripped of his confidence and exposed in front of the crowd, he realized the harsh truth. He had chosen the wrong man, a man who had survived decades of chaos, battles, and threats, and who had honed an authority that could break the bravest of challengers with a single look and a few precise words. By the time the crowd dispersed, the lesson had been etched into memory. People whispered the story, recorded it, and shared it across social media. The street, once ordinary, had become legendary, and Ozzy. He walked away as he always did, calm, collected, untouchable. The bodybuilder was left behind, humiliated, defeated, and fully aware that this confrontation would define him. But not in the way he had hoped. In the end, the consequence wasn't just for the bodybuilder. It was a reminder to everyone watching. Arrogance has limits, intimidation has boundaries, and the wrong opponent can make all of that crumble instantly. Ozzy Osbourne didn't need to fight physically to win. The result was already written the moment the bodybuilder decided to challenge him. And that result, absolute dominance. Total control, humiliation delivered flawlessly. The street was quiet now, but the energy remained electric. People lingered, phones still recording, hearts still racing, eyes still fixed on the spot where the confrontation had unfolded. What had started as a simple act of arrogance, the bodybuilder flexing, trying to intimidate Ozzy Osbourne, had transformed into a public masterclass in presence, control, and power. Ozzy straightened, adjusting his signature sunglasses, and let the silence speak. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw a punch. He didn't even shout. Yet every person on the street felt the magnitude of what had just occurred. The bodybuilder, once so confident and full of bravado, was gone. mentally defeated, ego shattered, and walking away without a word. The crowd had witnessed a rare thing, the quiet destruction of arrogance by sheer mastery. But Ozzy wasn't finished. He paused in the center of the street, letting the lesson sink in. Every person watching, every phone recording, every whispered conversation carried the story of the ultimate comeback. This was a lesson in power, one that didn't need violence, only precision and unshakable presence. The crowd absorbed it. They knew they had just witnessed something unforgettable. Then, almost imperceptibly, Ozzy glanced back toward where the bodybuilder had disappeared. That glance alone carried a message stronger than words. Choose your fights wisely, or you'll get burned. His smirk returned, calm and knowing. It wasn't mockery. It was a quiet warning. A signal that the wrong move against a legend never goes unanswered. The bystanders began murmuring again, replaying what they had seen in their minds. Phones continued recording, ready to go viral, capturing every second of the bodybuilder's fall and Ozzy's flawless dominance. It was a lesson on humility, power, and respect, one that no one in the crowd, or anyone who saw it later online, would forget. And then came the final twist, the cliffhanger. As Ozzy walked away, leaving the bodybuilder behind, he stopped for a single second and looked directly into the camera of a bystander recording the event. A small grin appeared on his face. He didn't need to say anything. The message was clear. The legend had survived, the arrogance had been crushed, and everyone watching knew that this was only one story among many. It left the audience with questions, excitement, and the thrill of unpredictability. What will Ozzy do next? Who else might try to challenge him? And will anyone ever truly match his presence? The story wasn't just over. It had become legendary, a tale destined to be shared, discussed, and replayed for years. The bodybuilder was now just a cautionary tale. His mistake had been arrogance, his loss had been total, and the lesson had been broadcast to the world. Never underestimate the wrong man, especially if that man is a legend who has mastered the art of presence, control, and psychological dominance. And as Ozzy disappeared into the city streets, the whispers grew louder, cameras continued recording, and the story began to spread beyond that block, beyond the city, beyond the screens. One confrontation had become a lesson for millions. A viral moment that proved without a doubt, muscles don't intimidate legends. Legends intimidate with presence. Legends win without lifting a finger. The final thought lingered in everyone's mind. If you think you're untouchable, think again. Some battles aren't fought with strength, they're fought with dominance. And the wrong opponent can end you in a heartbeat. With that, the screen fades. The legend walks away, the challenger is left behind, and the audience is left stunned, replaying every second, knowing they've just witnessed a story that will be shared endlessly.